In June of this year, philosopher Dr. Emile P. Therese published a paper called Do We Live in Hell? A comprehensive empirical survey of the world's vast suffering, which is, as they write, to provide the first, to my knowledge, comprehensive empirical survey of suffering in the world. At 27 pages, you might wonder how comprehensive it could be, until you read it. It is a list of numbers: those who have been murdered, those who have died violently, the number of babies who have died in a year, the number of people killed in wars and military conflicts, the number of people living in what's called acute multidimensional poverty, statistics for victims of rape and sexual abuse, physical and mental illness, statistics related to climate change, increasing wealth disparity, decreasing democracy, threats such as artificial intelligence, nuclear conflict, and by the time you've reached the end of it, you have well and truly, as our mates in darts say, earned the thirst. The world for us is shit. Not for all of us, although certainly for most of us. Not consistently, but certainly persistently. The numbers don't lie, or at least they speak for themselves. It just depends on what you do with them. But I mention this paper more for something that Dr. Therese writes in and afterwards, which I'll quote for you now. I am not a philosophical pessimist. More specifically, I do not believe that life is intrinsically not worth living, or that non-existence is always preferable to existence. Rather, I find it very hard to reject empirical pessimism. For contingent historical reasons, our world is a very bad place, in fact, worthy of the descriptor hell, defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as a place, state or situation of wickedness, suffering or misery. Patently, our world is a place of great wickedness, suffering and misery. Much of this misery is of our own making. People, one might plausibly argue, are on the whole selfish, greedy, callous, cruel, egotistical, arrogant, power-hungry, and, worst of all, largely indifferent to the suffering of others. But I am not convinced that people are inherently bad, only that broader societal, economic, political, technological, etc. structures bring out and encourage such characteristics in us. This is a distinction I would agree with, certainly when it comes to the rejection of philosophical pessimism. That would seem like a rejection of pessimism itself, but I don't think it is. I think philosophical pessimism has, for a long time, had a problem of being too metaphysical. If we start with Schopenhauer, we all know that his main thesis was the existence of the will, that one thing in itself that strives to represent itself to itself through everything that exists, from a breath of wind to human achievement. Its big problem was that it was not empirical, something Schopenhauer himself admits, as if it's not a problem at all, because for him materialism was limited in only addressing the phenomenal, whereas the noumenal is really where it's at. Schopenhauer's idealism was absolute, and he had no time for materialism in general, despite his interest in natural sciences. And philosophical pessimism has always been largely existential in quality. The great concerns have been the quality of the phenomena of life itself, and what ultimate value we humans should place on it. But arguments over what ultimate value we should place on it range back and forth without any resolution, because there can't be a resolution, and really nor should there be. Life itself does not have any intrinsic human value. It's up to us to attach value to it, as is our want. The majority, as we all know, is that life is tolerable enough to keep on with. That in itself isn't an endorsement of every aspect of it, or even a rational valuation, as our conscious attitude towards life will always be coloured by our biology, psychology and other factors. But this is all well-trodden ground. Therese has brought up uncompromising factual data to make the claim that philosophical pessimism has always made as part of a range of claims, that the world for us, the world as we know it, live in and experience, is as shitted as it gets, and in fact getting shitter. This is in the material sense, which presents as an existential crisis on the material plane. Could there be a comparable list of empirical facts for optimists? I would very much like to hope that there is, but attempts at such stuff haven't fared well. Steven Pinker's go at it has been answered by many people in many ways, including an entire book, The Darker Angels of Our Nature, which takes his history of violence in the world for us to task. Could the stats as presented by Therese be equally challenged? Very likely, I would think. It is, after all, an initial attempt at categorising the sufferings of the world for us, and could no doubt do with a lot of fleshing out, additional fact-checking and so on. I imagine responses are forthcoming. Still, it is a valid go at fleshing pessimism out with some real-world facts, as opposed to the current state of philosophical pessimism being more based on idealism and intuition. The latter essays of Schopenhauer, the aphorisms of Chiron, the gloomy repetition of Ligotti, as entertaining as it all is to read, all belong more to the realm of aesthetics. But does it mean anything for what I'm calling social pessimism? The fact that Dr. Therese makes the claim that things are shit is because of, to quote again, Broader societal, economic, political, technological, etc. structures bring out and encourage such characteristics in us. After writing this, they bring up the example of capitalism. Capitalism, for example, rewards avaricious and sociopathic individuals, and studies suggest that wealth may cause people to become less empathetic and ethical. I am, therefore, not willing to point the finger at humanity itself, although of course the aforementioned structures are the ones that we, or at least a subset of us, created. No argument here. Capitalism does reward avariciousness and sociopathic individuals, and it's not something we all created, but a subset. The only thing is, historically, capitalism has only been around for a bit. We've had millennia of social structures that have been equally dangerous, and the alternatives to capitalism haven't been better either. I'm convinced anyone living under Juche in North Korea would rather they weren't if they could conceive of alternatives. Still, it's got to be allowed that worldwide, capitalism rules. It's a very brief bit of text for me to hang my social pessimist hat on, but taking it more broadly, social pessimism has to rely on actual proof that our material conditions are unacceptable, ranging from bad enough to absolutely insane, depending on who and where, which makes all the difference to our psychological conditions. Dr. Therese makes a fist at providing such proof. As I said, it depends on what you want to do with the figures. We human beings are not some cancer on the planet, as our misanthropes and others would have us, excluding themselves, of course, but we are, in fact, if I can put it this way, victims of our own circumstances. We could see it as a feedback loop between we, humanity, and the social structures we create, or at the very least, and most common, acquiesce to. And can we be blamed? We are ultimately a tragic species, perhaps the tragic species, in that, as Zapffe reminds us, we are aware of our position in this tragedy in a way non-humans seem not to be, trapped and aware of being trapped, but aware also of not being able to escape the trap.